Welcome to the MCJ Report, ladies and gentlemen, MCJ Report number 39. That's right, I'd like to welcome everybody to the broadcast. We are broadcasting live across 3 platforms tonight. That's right, Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. That's right, our second time on Rumble. Rumble has just released live streaming, so of course we are supporting them in their initiative. So if you are watching on Rumble, I want to let you know I can't see your comments through the third-party software that I use, but I will be checking at the end of the show for the Q&A time to see who has been able to actually watch on Rumble, and at the end I will be able to see the comments. So I can see some of you tuning in right now on Facebook, YouTube, and it appears that there is about maybe 17 or so of you on Rumble, so I'd like to welcome everyone. Last time, those of you who tuned in on Rumble experienced the issue of freezing. Unfortunately, it appeared it worked for a bit and then it stopped working. So being a new feature on the Rumble platform, I think they'll probably need to go through some development tech issues, some resolutions to those problems before it becomes smooth. So I'd like to thank everyone who's here right now. I can see a bunch of you. There's Randall, Lisa, Sophie, Chris, Joe, Katrina, Jackie, Harry, Mark Rowley. We're going to be talking about Western Australia, that's right. So we're going to be talking about a few things on the MCJ Report tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be talking about my firm belief, many of our belief, that we in Australia must stop selling iron ore to China. It seems like we haven't learnt anything from history when we think back to World War II and the great protests in New South Wales against sending iron over to Japan. Looks like we are making the same mistake again, although this time there's no protests. But maybe we'll change that. We're also going to talk about the term poison, more so in relation to some of the activity from Western Australia, but it applies nationwide. The term poison in relation to the COVID-19 vaccines, and we're going to be pulling up some legislation to look at some various acts in relation to how the term poison is used within the Therapeutic Goods Administration and how it's applied to what's called medicines and poisons. So I can see a bunch of you tuned in right now. I want to welcome everyone to the show, and we may as well not waste any time and get straight to it. All right, so some corona updates. You can say no, of course, which reminds me, we do have some events taking place on the weekend where if you would like to become part of the solution in distributing information to counter the narrative pushed by the government, then stick around, or better yet, jump on my Telegram, Morgan C. Jonas, and I'll post up the information about how you can get involved in that. All right, so let's go through some corona updates, shall we? All right, what do we have here? From New South Wales, max vaccination clinic open, but over 50s urged to see GP. Right, fair enough. All right, mass vaccination clinics, of course, the government getting desperate. We hear that Australians are actually cancelling their appointments to go and get the shot. We're seeing the side effects, of course, being reported. We've seen it for a while now, but maybe it affects people a little bit differently when they see it happening at home. Gladys Berejiklian, of course, doing everything in her power to try and convince the people of New South Wales to just line up, take the shot, and to not ask any of their own questions. Says here, New South Wales long-awaited mass COVID-19 vaccination clinic will open on May 10th, although most newly eligible over 50s will need to wait another fortnight. Boo-hoo. The Sydney Olympic Park Clinic will initially be used to complete the vaccinations for frontline healthcare and quarantine workers and their families. All right, so Sydney Olympic Park not being used for its intended purpose of sport, rather mass vaccination. We see here in Israel the dangers of COVID-19 immunity-based licenses. This is an opinion piece. So, of course, we look at Israel, we see a country where 60% of the people have been vaccinated. But we've seen some very terrible things in Israel. Of course, we've seen tremendous discrimination against people choosing not to take the shot, people being refused from entering shopping centers, bars, concerts, and so forth. So I'm just going to read to you a little bit here. This is a program to incentivize vaccination. The government initiated the Green Pass, a certificate granting access to entertainment, sporting, and dining venues to anyone who's been vaccinated or recovered from COVID-19, right? Since in Israel, vaccination is not compulsory, they say it's not compulsory, they'll just cast you off into an obscure corner of society and label you unclean if you don't take it. It says here, the Green Pass was initially limited to leisure activities, but as businesses grappled with the thorny issue of managing vaccinated and unvaccinated employees, you see the language here, us versus them, the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. This has to be the biggest divisive campaign of our lifetimes. In the workplace, businesses initiated restrictive policies of their own. All right, so offering perks to people that get vaccinated and punishing those who don't. I dare say this may be coming to a business near you pretty soon, unfortunately, here in Australia. But we've also seen the government in Israel take further measures to punish people for not getting vaccinated, such as implementing measures such as requiring people to get tested every 72 hours. Okay, so basically making life a living hell for people who choose not to take this provisionally approved vaccine. And it says here, health officials admitted to seeking ways to make getting tested more difficult, thereby encouraging more people to vaccinate it. Is that called encouragement or is that called coercion? Is that called manipulating the public into stepping in line or risk facing being an outcast in society? All right, so that's what's going on in Israel. More of the same antics, of course, really terrible, and we see it happening in other places of the world. It's also important to remember that the World Health Organization, as it says here, actually doesn't support these vaccine passports. And even the WHO, given everything they have done up until this stage, has issued some warnings on this particular vaccine passport. One of the concerns being due to what they refer to as vaccine equity, the other being in relation to what it says here, whether vaccines can prevent the coronavirus from being transmitted. Okay, so the World Health Organization not even sure if these vaccines do what they're intended to do. Of course, there's never been a vaccine for any coronavirus that we've seen. Coronaviruses have been around forever. Remember, we looked at a research study from webmd.com that said in the study that 1 out of 5 colds are caused by coronaviruses. What's causing your cold? It could be a coronavirus, it could be something else. It's not a new phenomenon. It's something that has been around for a long time. And according to that study, webmd.com, if you've been sick more than 5 times, chances are you have had a coronavirus in your lifetime that you probably didn't even know about. You just thought that you had a cold. Anyway, moving forward. Forward to Reuters, fully vaccinated people can unmask outdoors in some cases. So there you go. This is like offering breadcrumbs. We've seen similar sort of tactics during the overthrow of many countries that went through, say, communist revolutions. Okay, stripping people of their basic dignities, giving them a little bit of freedom back to create an effect, to create the impression that the government is kind and generous. Because of course, when you've been stripped of everything and you're given a small amount of freedom back, that freedom will seem bigger and more significant than what it really is. It's psychological warfare at its worst. All right, so what we have here coming from the United States, and these are generally democratic-run states that are being the most strict and tyrannical when it comes to these lockdown and corona measures. It says here, fully vaccinated people can safely engage in outdoor activities like walking and hiking without wearing masks. Oh, thank you so much, government. Allowing these people to walk in the hills, to walk in the mountains without wearing a mask. I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, seeing people walking outside, no one else around wearing a mask has to be one of the most ridiculous sights I've seen in my entire life. Put in the comments if you've had a funny experience like that as well, where you've seen someone just... Or what about people driving in cars on their own, windows up, wearing a mask? All right, so as you can see here, we have the a state government basically acting as if they are the liberator of people over there in the United States in relation to not wearing masks while hiking. Just more lunacy in a long line of COVID lunacy. Here we go in Hong Kong to reopen bars and nightclubs for vaccinated customers. So we're seeing the trend all over the world. Get the vaccination, you will be rewarded. We will give you back your freedom. Your freedom depends on vaccination. Well, I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, our freedom does not depend on vaccination. It depends on enough of we, the people, getting together and saying that we have had enough of these traitorous politicians that work within the walls of our parliament. That's what will get our freedoms back, not something in a syringe. Says here, Hong Kong will reopen bars and nightclubs from April 29th for people who have been vaccinated and who use a government mobile phone application. All right, so they're rolling out their own passport, saying you want a bit of freedom. And of course, Hong Kong has completely fallen under the iron fist rule of the Chinese Communist Party. So I dare say there'll be very little freedom for anyone in Hong Kong who does not do exactly what the CCP wants them to do. All right, so that's it for the Corona update section. Let's keep this show on the road, shall we? A little bit of an update from Myanmar. A lot of you know the protests have been going on for a long time in Myanmar now in protest of the democratically elected leader who was, of course, arrested by the military, accused of voter fraud. And since that time, we've seen the formation of a new military dictatorship in Myanmar. It's been met with, of course, ferocious protest. Millions of people have taken the streets to stand up for what they believe was an incorrect decision by the military to jail the democratically elected leader. So millions of people are hitting the streets of Myanmar to stand up for democracy, essentially fighting for their freedoms. Of course, there's been many, many murders. The military have engaged in brutality. Thousands of people have been killed and countless amounts of people have been severely injured by the brutal military forces called the junta in Myanmar. But here's what's happening now. Civilians are actually training with smaller ethnic militia groups in order to fight back against the Myanmar militia. That's right. So I'm going to show you the story here, okay? Because what it appears is that the citizens have had enough and now they are training for a physical confrontation. Something that it just happens, ladies and gentlemen. It happens all the time throughout history. A tyrannical government seizes power, imposes oppression, and regular day citizens are forced and left with no other options but to pick up arms and to fight against the government that was supposed to be serving in their best interests. I'm going to show you some footage here from Myanmar titled Youths in Black, Myanmar Protesters Trained to Fight the Junta. Check this out.
Running in formation and chanting for the people. Around 120 youth in Myanmar released a video this month calling themselves the new fighting force against the Myanmar military. A founder of the group, Mon Mon, said her United Defence Force was made up of protesters against the February 1st coup. The handout images are the first to appear that show former protesters in training with ethnic armies in Myanmar's borderlands, a sign of the country's deepening crisis. Most are students in their 20s, but some are older adults or Generation Z, said Mon Mon, and that around 1,000 people were in the organisation. Apart from handout images, Reuters was unable to independently verify the details. Mon Mon added that the group was not big enough to operate independently, so would need to cooperate with ethnic armed groups or the newly formed parallel government called the National Unity Government, set up by the junta's civilian rivals.
All right, so there you go, ladies and gentlemen. The young people of Myanmar saying that they've had enough. They've had enough of the oppression and they are willing to train and to take up arms in order to overthrow the oppressors that are ruling over them. So, of course, we hope that they're okay and wishing them our best regards. Anyway, I'm just going to make sure that we're connected here before we get on to the next part of the show. I can see we are connected on YouTube and Facebook. Not too sure about Rumble. I'm just heading over right now. It looks like Rumble, unfortunately, might be frozen, so I can't see much activity on Rumble at this stage, but I can see plenty of you on Facebook, on YouTube, Tracy, David, Anna, Belinda, Terry. It's great to see you guys. You guys could be doing anything right now, but you're not. You've decided that you'd like to tune into the MCJ Report. So I just want you all to know that I really appreciate each and every one of you being here. And it's great that we can all come together for some alternative news from a different perspective. The MCJ Report has been a long time in the making. You know, I first had the idea I wanted to run a show like this all the way back in 2015, and now it's finally happening. So I'm glad that all of you are a part of it. And there's my mate Jerry in the chat right there. Jerry's doing great things right here in Melbourne. He'll be making an appearance on the show really soon. So nonetheless, let's keep this moving and get on to the next part of the show. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the Chinese Communist Party. Here's the situation. We in Australia need to stop selling our iron ore to China. When we look at China, what we see is an imperialist, expansionist regime that has global ambitions of overtaking the United States in terms of the world's leader. Okay? When we look at China, we see an authoritarian state that engages in the world's worst human rights abuses and crimes against humanity. From a foreign policy perspective, we see China's militarization of the South China Sea. We see the constant entering of other nations' sovereign waters and exclusive economic zones around the world. We, of course, know about Chinese Communist Party objectives such as the Belt and Road Initiative, which are designed to set up debt traps around the world as a way of leveraging diplomacy, advancing China's commercial interests, and I dare say their military interests as well. Of course, we look at Africa, for instance. Many nations in Africa have fallen under debt traps via the Belt and Road Initiative. One nation, Djibouti in Africa, actually allowed China to set up a military base. Now, this is all pretty grim news when we consider China's global ambitions to dominate in terms of cultural and commercial hegemony, seeking to dominate the trading routes, whether it's over the land or on the sea. And of course, we see China seeking to develop further ties with strategic areas such as Myanmar, linking the Indian Ocean to go all the way up through West Asia and ultimately into Europe. Now, it's really important to point out that none of China's expansion would be possible without Australian steel. So this is the section that I'm going to go into detail and really try to paint a picture in regards to how crucial Australia is to China. And it's my firm belief that here in Australia, we have the ultimate bargaining power over China. Now, a lot of people think it's the other way around, and they think that because we're so dependent on the Chinese market for so many of our exports, and China, unlike Australia, has the capability to slightly alter their foreign policy in terms of import-export that can result in the absolute devastation of Australian industries. And we've seen it, right? We've seen it with our wine, our barley, our beef, our tourism. China can make a small adjustment to who they buy from and completely wipe out Australian producers by taking their business elsewhere. And they can do that with almost all exports that go out of Australia and into China. But the one export they can't do that with is iron ore, and iron ore is the most important export of them all. This is the active, of course, ingredient of steel. So simply put, without Australian steel, China stops. I'm going to illustrate to you what I'm getting at, so stay tuned. Check this out. All right, so this is what got me onto this topic. Actually, I've been speaking about this for a while now, on the MCJ Report. My firm belief is that if we continue to ship our iron ore to China, one day, if things don't change, that iron ore will ultimately come back to Australia in the form of military equipment and bullets. Okay, so meanwhile, China is drastically expanding their military, and I dare say they're doing so with Australian steel. Okay, so this was a story from one day ago from Defense News. China simultaneously commissions 3 warships on Navy anniversary. I'm going to read to you a little bit here, and I'll put this story into context in relation to iron ore exports into China. All right. China commissioned 60,000 tons worth of major vessels. That's a lot of steel, by the way. Earlier this month, officially putting into service a new nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine, a guided missile cruiser, and an amphibious helicopter carrier on the 72nd anniversary of its Navy. The unprecedented triple commissioning was carried out in a ceremony held at the Yulin Naval Complex near the city of Sanya on the southern Chinese island of Hainan. Yulin is the main naval base of the South Sea Fleet of the People's Liberation Army Navy. The fleet's area of responsibility lies in the waters of the nearby South China Sea. Now, of course, we see in the South China Sea, illegal militarized man-made islands by China, made undeniably with Australian steel. And of course, we see the commissioning of these 3 warships undeniably with Australian steel as well. Now, China is on a tear to grow their military. Okay, according to globalfirepower.com, China has the 3rd strongest military in the world and is very much seeking to move that ranking to number 1. Go to mcjreport.com, put your email address in, and I'll send you all of these sources. This is actually a pretty good resource here, globalfirepower.com. It compares different military forces from around the world and takes into account many different metrics in order to determine their strength. All right, why do we say that we have the ultimate bargaining power with China in relation to iron ore? Okay, so what I'm going to show you here, this is coming from OEC.com. So this is the Observatory for Economic Complexity. I'm going to show you some charts here. So when we look at China, we look at their imports. Now this is 2019, but the figures do take a little bit to trickle through, but this is a very good guide for us to go off. Iron ore is China's 3rd biggest import. Okay, when we look at the origins of iron ore, Australia makes up 66.4% of Chinese iron ore imports. That is an overwhelming majority, followed by Brazil, and then after that point, followed by South Africa. Now, it's important, I nearly dropped my microphone. It's important to point out that Brazil has had some major problems with their iron ore mines. They were forced to close several mines last year. They've had some bad accidents in their mines. They closed off their mines due to corona, etc. So this is part of the reason why last year Australia had such a strong iron ore year. Andrew Forrest did very well, as did other people in the industry, and China's appetite for steel has only been growing. But to put it in perspective, look at this right here. China relies on Australia for 66.4% of their iron ore needs, and that figure could be a little bit higher today, meaning they can't replace us. Now, China can replace our beef. If China stops buying our beef, they'll simply go to Argentina. They stop buying our wine, they go to Italy, okay, and so forth. But there is no other supplier for the sheer volume of iron ore that China requires for its military and commercial expansion, okay? Australia is it. There's no other country that has the reserves. There's no other country that can produce the volume and the quality in terms of the iron content that is within the iron ore. Not all iron ore is actually usable. The iron content needs to be roughly 60% or higher for the iron ore to be any good. And there is no other source outside of Australia that can produce and supply China what we produce and supply. Now, moving on here, to show you, this is now in relation to our exports. This is our exports here in Australia. So you see iron ore 23.8%. Okay. Now, in our regards to our other exports, we have 39.1% of our exports going to China, which is absolute lunacy. Our government for decades now has made our economy completely dependent on the Chinese market and has put us in a very terrible position whereby our national security is jeopardized as a result of that. All right, but I'm going to just show you a little bit more about iron ore. So just bear with me here. So this is how badly our iron ore industry is dependent on China. China makes up for 81.7% of Australian iron ore exports. Okay, so a huge amount. So if there's anyone that does not want the relationship between Australia and China to be disrupted, it's China, and it's the key players in the iron ore industry in Western Australia. Okay, so just to put it back here, China needs us for 66.4% of their iron ore import needs. And here in Australia, we export 81.7% of our iron ore to China, iron ore being our biggest export. And this is a very sad state. This is a sad reflection on the state of affairs of our export markets here in Australia. We dig up this crude iron ore. We don't process it. We don't do anything with it. We ship it off to China. A lot of the time, China processes it. They water it down. They reduce the grading and they sell it back to us here in Australia. How silly are we? While we were sitting back sleeping watching the AFL, we allowed our government and the governments before it to completely destroy the complexity of our economy. Here in Australia, we used to have a very complex economy. We used to make everything. Now what do? We dig resources out of the ground. We don't refine them. We put them on boats and we send them to China. And now China is expanding their military at record rates that we've never seen before, courtesy of Australian steel that they cannot source anywhere else in the world. We are creating our biggest enemy and an enemy to many other nations. All right, I'm going to keep this rolling here. Okay, so that was the same graph that I just showed you right there. All right, so I'm going to show you some statistics right here regarding the top iron ore producing countries in the world. You see, China is playing a game of threatening Australia. They've attacked all of our industries and they've loosely threatened to attack our iron ore industry. But the truth is, it's all empty words. China knows damn well that their economic rise and their global ambitions cannot be met without the use of Australian steel. To put it simply, without Australian steel, China stops. No more industrial expansion, no more expansion of their military, no more bogus Belt and Road Initiative jobs around the world, no more bolstering and militarization of the South China Sea. China would be brought to a screeching halt if Australia was to halt iron ore exports to China. That is my firm belief. Maybe you see it differently. If you do, put that in the comments. All right, so top 9 iron ore producing countries. Here we go, Australia right here, usable ore. Okay, this is a very important term here, usable. China may produce more iron ore than us, but it's not usable, okay? So it can't be used for the same type of commercial development as can Australian iron ore be used for, okay? So low-grade iron ore has way less functions than usable iron ore, where the iron content is 60% or higher. Okay, now most sources tend to agree with this position here of Australia being the number 1 producer. All right, so this is coming from investingnews.com. Here we have nsenergybusiness.com, Australia ranked at number 1. Wikipedia, Australia number 1. And you can find throughout various sources agree that Australia is the number 1 iron ore producing country in the world, which is nothing more than an objective fact in relation to usable iron ore, which of course then is turned into steel. All right, so I'm going to read to you a little bit here from Global Iron Ore Production Data. Okay, so this is coming from National Minerals Information Center, US Geological Survey. It says here, iron ore consumed in the steel industry typically require an iron ore content greater than 58% before being considered commercially usable. Okay, whereas China, they can't do that. Now, if we have a look here to the Australian government, Geoscience Australia, in relation to iron ore, hematite is an iron oxide mineral. It's non-magnetic and has color variations ranging from steel silver to reddish brown. Pure mineral hematite contains 69.9% iron. Okay, so 70% we have here, iron content of Australian iron ore. And it says here that roughly 96% of Australia's iron ore exports are high-grade hematite. So we've got here 70%, and for usable iron ore, it's considered from 58% upwards, meaning that Australia has an abundance of high-quality iron ore and a huge volume that simply cannot be reproduced or sourced from somewhere else in the world. Iron ore, according to China, iron ore is just like wine. They can stop buying our wine and buy it from somewhere else. Not the case. It does not work that way with a commodity like this. All right, so here's what China is threatening, okay? We've seen an avalanche of propaganda being released from the propaganda kitchens of the Chinese Communist Party, threatening to find alternative iron ore markets. And if it was up to me, if I was running Australia, I'd tell them, go ahead and try and find it, because we're not selling it to you anymore, because we recognize you for the predatory global player that you are. And my firm belief is that it is in the best interest of Australians that we stop supplying China with their steel. That is my firm belief. Might we suffer a little bit in the short term? We probably would. It would mean less money coming into our economy. But we need to be thinking long term, not short term. So look at this. It looks like, and we see this time and time again, propaganda is cooked up from the propaganda experts at the Chinese Communist Party, put out into the world, picked up by the Western media, and then relayed to us in the Western world. This is coming from miningtechnology.com, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. How China is moving beyond Australia for its iron ore hunger. says here, China has a seemingly endless hunger for iron ore. That's because they're expansionists, and that's because they're trying to build their military into a global force that the world has never seen before. They want to overtake the United States. They can only do it with Australian iron ore. Remember that. It says here, but the country's relationship with one of its primary providers, Australia, has been tenuous following the political fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. Right? If you think back, last year, Scott Morrison called for an investigation into the origins of corona. The Chinese Communist Party didn't like that call out and responded in attacking Australian industries. We saw the attacks on our barley, beef, wine, etc. It says here, we take a look at how China's been investing in other nations to meet this hunger and how it may affect the iron ore market. All right. So China's got this idea that they can replace Australia as their iron ore provider by finding alternative iron ore mines in Africa. Okay, there's very little evidence to suggest they can be successful in doing this. I'm going to read to you a little bit here. It says here, Australia has long been China's go-to for iron ore. Yeah. And with Australia's vast iron ore production and the proximity of the two countries making for a productive relationship. It has been, and that relationship needs to end. Australia is the largest source of feed for China's steel mills, with around 60% of China's iron ore imports originating from Australian mines. We read before from OEC that's more like 66%, and I dare say it's a little bit higher due to the issues with the Brazilian iron ore mines last year. But ongoing tensions between the countries have alarmed the iron ore and steel industry, with speculation over the future of China-Australian iron ore trade. It says here, Australia remains vital for China's iron supply. That's what we've been saying on the MCJ report for a long time now. China cannot survive without Australian iron ore. It says here, a suggested response to China's trade restrictions has been to stop sending Australian iron to China. Yeah, that's what we should do. It's really the one export Australia has that China needs. That's true as well. For all its economic and political strength, the Chinese state will not easily replace 60% of its iron ore supply. Not easily replace? I say it can't replace it. Where are the other reserves for this amount of iron ore? Where are they in the world? Can someone please bring it to my attention? The term reserves meaning that it's accessible and can be dug out of the ground, which requires infrastructure, expertise, and of course the right environment to be able to make these extractions. It says here, China's other major supplier is Brazil, which has been struggling with COVID-19 infections in its mining sector, as well as high-profile mining accidents that have undermined confidence in the industry in recent years. Theoretically, Australia could deal a severe blow to China by withholding the iron ore it craves and perhaps accelerate a resolution to the tensions. Andrew Forrest wouldn't want that to happen. Rio Tinto, they wouldn't be too happy about it. But I dare say it's in the best interest of national security that we take immediate measures. Okay? It says here, however far the war of words extends from Prime Minister Scott Morrison, Australia is unlikely to cut off a market worth tens of billions of dollars. That's because our lazy government think about the short term, as they have from when they signed the Lima Declaration in the early 70s. These governments have been on a spree to outsource our manufacturing, to decomplexify our economy, and as a result of their lazy foreign policy approach, our future has been put into the hands of a torturous regime known as the Chinese Communist regime. We need to be taking action on this straight away. If I was in Parliament, I would be talking about this every single day. If you ask me, this is the most important issue in our country right now. Okay? We had great workers protesting back during the time of World War II against the exportation of steel to Japan because they were concerned that steel would come back to Australia in the form of bullets. And guess what? They were right. We have no reason to believe that China will not invade Australia in the future. We have the two biggest commodities that China wants, and these are the two biggest reasons why any nation goes to war: land and resources. This is a matter of common sense. Australia is one of the least densely populated countries in the world. Australia has a very small population, 25 million people, huge landmass, not densely populated at all, and of course we are resource rich beyond the likes of most countries. These are the two commodities China needs. 1.5 billion people. They need more living space. They want to dominate the world in terms of global trade, militarization. They want to become the world's superpower. To do that, they need resources that we have here in Australia. Now, you know, a lot of resources that are under the ground here in Australia, they can't be dug out due to Aboriginal mining rights. But I guarantee you, should China invade Australia one day, should China step foot and put boots on the ground, they won't give two damns about Aboriginal mining rights. They'll go and take those resources and continue their tear of global authoritarianism unless we manage to put some better people in Parliament, people that actually love our country and give a damn about our national security and the future of Australians and future Australians. Isn't that just a matter of common sense? All right, let's keep this moving here. All right, so China is supposedly trying to set up alternative iron ore mining operations in Africa. It says here, China's opportunities and risks in Africa's giant iron ore field. Guinea region holds the world's largest untapped reserves but lacks the infrastructure. So I'm not sure if that's a correct use of the term reserves. Generally, the term reserves implies that these minerals and resources are under the ground but can be easily accessed. Or they're accessible. Whereas what we see here is a lack of infrastructure, and sometimes certain environmental elements make mining an impossibility. All right, so I'm not sure if China has been able to determine beyond a reasonable doubt that these iron ore reserves are legitimate reserves, whether or not the iron content of the iron ore is of a suitable level, and whether or not it's even a possibility. If we look at the major mining magazines and publications, Africa is not listed in the top 10 for countries that have reliable iron ore reserves, and there's a reason for it. Some of those factors I just mentioned. All right. So looking here, it says China determined to build iron ore hub in Africa as Australia goes quad. Quad referring to the democratic alliance between Australia and some democratic nations. It says here the world's largest untapped reserve could be online by 2025. Expert says. I don't know who the hell is this expert. We don't know. All right. Now, if this is a possibility by 2025, then we need to act now, right? If it's possible, let's hypothesize here. If it is possible that there is some huge iron ore reserve out there that can be mined, that can replace the production of Australia, the same output, the same quality, then why on earth would we sit around waiting for China to replace us? We should cut them off right now. Now, I don't believe that's possible. I don't believe China can replace us, all right? But even if they can, we should cut them off right now to save future headaches. I'm going to read to you a little bit here. This is coming from NikkeiAsia.com. Again, if you want the sources used in this show, go to MCJReport.com, put your email address in. I'll send you everything. Of course, we can't read through all the articles on the show. There'd be too much to go through. We'd be here, for 10 hours. But when I send you the email, you can pick and choose which parts you want to read. Says here, there was a time when Japan, like China today, was the rising power in the East that kept military planners in the West awake at night. Now it's China keeping us awake. Says here, it is very certain that no other nation at the present time is spending so large a part of its revenue on naval preparations, military author Hector Bywater wrote in the book 1921, Sea Power in the Pacific, a study of the American-Japanese naval problem. Isn't this funny? Do you see the parallel right here? Of course, we see this book right here in relation to Japan's naval rise. And of course, we started off the segment with China's naval rise. Okay, now, I'm going to keep reading to you here. But Japan had a critical weakness, lack of steel. Just like China today. I mean, history is repeating itself. Back then, Japan had imperialist ambitions. Now Japan's a great ally. We love Japan. Now it's China with the imperialist ambitions that needs to be put back in their place in the world. It says here, since the close of the Great War, shipbuilding in Japan has been seriously hampered by the difficulty of obtaining steel, Bywater observed in his book, which accurately predicted a naval conflict between Imperial Japan and the US 2 decades later. He predicted the confrontation 20 years before it happened, all right? Now, you and I, or some of you, maybe not all of you in the chat, we're predicting a confrontation between China and Australia. We're not sure when it will happen. It may happen sooner than what we may think. And they will fight us with our own steel. All right, I'm going to keep reading here. Japan had imported large quantities of American steel under a special agreement between the two governments prior to 1917, when the US imposed a steel embargo that stemmed the flow into the Asian country. That's what we need to be doing in Australia. a steel embargo from Australia to China. It says here, so serious has the shortage become of late that the output of tonnage in Japan during 1920 was 25% short of the forecast of 800,000 tons, which had been made in January of that year, Bywater wrote. This scarcity of steel reacted on the naval program, delaying the launch and completion of ships. Well, it didn't delay the launch and completion of these 3 warships in China, because here in Australia, our lazy leaders, our short-sighted leaders, for whatever reason, don't seem to understand that they are building our biggest enemy. Or do they understand it and they just don't care? They just care about making their books look good. All right, moving back to the article here. It says here, Chinese state planners looking to learn from history would quickly notice that the glaring vulnerability for Beijing today is its dependence on iron ore from Australia. That's right. We have the ultimate bargaining power over China. Without our steel, China can't do anything. While Beijing has tried to squeeze and punish Canberra for proposing an international investigation into the roots of COVID, it has been unable to wrestle itself away from Australian iron ore, which accounts for over 60% of China's imports, which we said before. We are the ones in the position of power here. But the Australian government and China would have you think otherwise. It says here, but that dependence may very well change by 2025. A senior analyst of metals and mining at the Australian investment firm Shaw and Peters says here, they're very serious about diversifying supply and flattening the cost curve of iron ore. So he thinks that they're going to set up in West Africa. Says here, the top focus of China's diversification push is Guinea, an impoverished but mineral-rich country in West Africa. A 110-kilometre range of hills called Simandu is said to hold the world's largest reserve of untapped quality iron ore. Okay, this is according to this one man though. All right, so this is what China is saying. They think that they're going to set up this mine over in Africa. And if it is indeed possible, it's something that needs to be stopped. All right, so again, mcjreport.com, you can read it. All right, now this is coming from nsenergybusiness.com. This is from earlier this year, 18th of January. We're talking about iron ore reserves. So we see one person speculating that supposedly the best reserves are in Africa, but I can't see how one could speculate that given the little amount we actually know about iron ore in that country, whether or not it's accessible, infrastructure, whether the environment makes it possible, and so forth. It says here, 7 countries with the largest iron ore reserves in the world. Okay, so no surprises. Australia, we should be using this iron ore to build our country, not China. Brazil had big problems last year. Russia, China. Okay, so China coming in at number 4. A lot of China's iron ore production, by the way, is not usable. It's low quality, just like a lot of other products to come out of China. Ukraine, Canada, India. So that's the top 7. No African nations included. All right. So let's look at iron ore in Africa. This is coming from Wikipedia. Let's see. So this is just some information country to country. Again, mcjreport.com, I'll send it out to you. And there's also information about iron ore from Britannica.com. Now, this is actually the list I wanted to show you here. So, list of countries by iron ore production. Australia coming in at number 1. The first African nation is South Africa. Now, South Africa uses most of their iron ore. They need it for their own country, but they do export some to China, but not nearly enough to rival that of Australia. Okay, so China can't replace us with South Africa. All right, we move down the list. We're looking for another African nation, and we come here number 6, Mauritania. Okay, maybe I said that wrong. Coming in at number 16, and we move down to number 22, Sierra Leone. Okay, so very, very small reserves and very small production outputs from these African nations. So I think it's really, it really begs the question, is it all talk by China trying to imply that they can simply replace us by developing these iron ore operations in Africa? It's true that via the Belt and Road Initiative, China is paying off one corrupt African official after another and sinking their teeth into the African market, often using Africans as a means of slave labor to outsource production from China to Africa. Okay, working hand in hand with many thuggish leaders in Africa to impose communist-style surveillance states. It's absolutely disgusting what China is doing in that continent. And now they seek to rob Africa of their resources. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how it plays out. Now, what does the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, think about this? He thinks it's all absolutely fine. That's right. Josh Frydenberg isn't worried about national security. Here's what he says. Treasurer confident iron ore will continue to flow despite low point in China relations. Confident iron ore will continue to flow. Never mind China's military rise, never mind China's industrial rise or ambitions to dominate the world commercially, militarily, and culturally. The Treasurer is confident iron ore will continue to flow. So there he is, Josh Frydenberg. He says iron ore exports to China are not in any danger. Well, you know what? They should be in danger, not for us, for China. I dare say that Treasurer Josh Frydenberg has his priorities in the wrong place. All right, now I'm going to conclude this section of the show by reminding you about Pig Iron Bob Menzies. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this World War II story. You can research it more in your own time. Probably a lot of you are aware of it. Okay, history is repeating itself. This time round, it's imperialist China. Back during World War II, it was imperialist Japan. It says here, this is from the author of a documentary. This is the story of a community that said no to the military build-up of the Japanese imperialist regime, an ally of the Nazi government. And you can argue that the Chinese communist regime is no better than the Nazis. And in doing so, inspired workers in their communities worldwide. Okay? On November 15th, 1938, 180 men refused to load pig iron onto the ship Delfram when they realized the destination was Kobe, Japan. They refused because they believed the pig iron would be used for bullets and bombs against the Chinese. So we stood up for the Chinese back then during the military takeover of Nanking and eventually Australia. So they refused to load the boats because they were concerned about the Japanese invasion in China and that Japan would ultimately invade Australia, and that's exactly what happened. As a moral stand, the men and their families stayed out of work for 9 weeks with no pay, supported by organisations, businesses and workers and families from around Australia, including Illawarra miners. On January 11th, Menzies came to Wollongong to sort out the dispute and over 4,000 people protested. I tell you what, the entire country should be protesting over our exportation of iron ore to China. Everybody should be protesting this. He was given the nickname Pig Iron Bob. All right, and here is an image of the protest from that time. Okay, it's no secret. It is no secret what China's ambitions are. We look at the suffocation of Hong Kong, the crimes against humanity being conducted on a massive scale in China and East Turkestan, the concentration camps, the organ harvesting, the expansion of their military, the invasion of other countries, and we're just standing by and giving them all the steel they need. Ladies and gentlemen, it must stop. It needs to stop. And this should be at the top of our priorities. It absolutely must stop. All right. That's it for this section. Let me just make sure that you guys are all connected. Let me see here. Let's see. We have Facebook, YouTube. I'm not sure if anyone can hear me on Rumble. There's Alice, Nikki, Richard, Andrea, Ray, Snufflenose. How you going? Apparently, Rumble's freezing and not really working too well, which is, I guess, to be expected. But you know what? I'm going to stick with Rumble, and we're going to keep on going. We're going to keep persevering because I like what they're doing. I like their vision, and I believe that Rumble could very well be a very important tool for us. All right. So that's it for that section right there. We're going to move on to our next section. All right. This is pretty intense. We're getting pretty intense on the MCJ report, but you know, it's very frustrating because no one in our parliaments is addressing the tremendous national and global security risk that we're responsible for due to the exportation of iron ore to China. No one's talking about it. We're talking about it on the MCJ report. It absolutely needs to stop. You see the risk, I see the risk. We need to get the word out there. This should be one of the biggest protests of our time, actually. So I would love to protest this in the thousands. Let me know your thoughts on that. All right, we're going to talk about the term poison in relation to the COVID-19 vaccine. Some of you have sent me some references from some Western Australian legislation. So we're going to get stuck into that and go through it one by one to dissect the term poison and medicine via the Therapeutic Goods Administration in relation to the COVID-19 vaccines. So let's get stuck into that right now. All right, so maybe some of you have seen this. This is coming from wa.gov.au. authorization to supply or administer vaccine. Guidance, this is an instrument of authorization to supply or administer a poison SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 vaccine. So of course, a lot of us felt quite concerned when we saw the word poison. I'm going to try and put it in perspective for you. What it appears is that the term poison and medicine is interchangeable in relation to the application of goods that are considered therapeutic goods. Okay. Now this is an authorization from the Chief Health Officer in Western Australia, but it says here this is not a direction per se. It's an authorization by the Chief Health Officer under Section 197 and Section 198 Public Health Act 2016 Western Australia to authorize nurses and midwives of Aspen Medical referred to in this instrument to supply and administer COVID-19 vaccines. Now it actually expands from this to authorized officers, but we'll get to that in a second. All right, so we have here on March. All right, so this was from February 2021, and this here is from March 2021, ramping up the scope of who can administer these vaccines. So what we have here, again, another instrument of authorization enacted by the... Sorry, I should have had that screen up. All right, we've got it now. Instrument of authorization enacted by the Chief Health Officer. So this was the one I showed you before, and this is the one here. Basically, an authorization for the purpose of expanding the scope of people who are authorized to administer the COVID-19 vaccine, which has been referred to as a poison. All right. So this time around, it says an authorization by the CHO, again under the same section of the Public Health Act of 2016, which essentially gives the Chief Health Officer the capability to override the protocols otherwise set out in the Public Health Act, this time to authorise relevant Australian Defence Force employees to supply and administer the COVID-19 vaccine. All right, so we're going to take a little bit of a look into this now. So obviously at a first glance, it does seem pretty concerning. We hear the term poison and we think of something that kills us. And well, I suppose many people around the world have died shortly after being injected with this supposed COVID vaccine. So if we look at the Merriam-Webster dictionary, here's the term poison. Definition of poison: a substance that through its chemical action usually kills, injures, or impairs an organism. Something destructive or harmful, an object of aversion or abhorrence, a substance that inhibits the activity of another substance or the course of a reaction or process. All right, sounds pretty bad. Now, we look here to the Poisons Act of 1964, to the definition outlined in the Act. Again, mcjreport.com, go there, fill your email address in, and I'll send you all of these documents. So according to the Act here, a poison means any substance included in a schedule. All right, so what is a schedule? We'll get to that right now. So the schedules are outlined here in the Medicines and Poisons Act 2015, but have been part of the Therapeutic Goods Administration Act for much longer. All right, so classification of substances as poisons. Each substance other than an exempt substance described in an item in the table is classified as a poison included in the schedule specified in that item. All right, so the schedule that we'll be referring to throughout this segment are Schedule 4 poisons and medicines. Okay, so a substance listed in the SUSMP Schedule 4 considered a poison here, classification of a substance or a poison. All right, this will all make sense in a little bit. I just need to get through these definitions with you in order to put this segment in context. All right, so what is the SUSMP? You see, the government, they don't make it easy for us to understand the terminology they use. So we're going to dissect it right here on the MCJ report. So that stands for the Standard for the Uniform Scheduling of Medicines and Poisons, okay, which is an Australian legislative instrument produced by the Therapeutic Goods Administration. The SUSMP classifies drugs and poisons into different schedules, signifying the degree of control recommended to be exercised over their availability to the public. Okay, so it's essentially a schedule that is determined by the Therapeutic Goods Administration that relates to how medicines and poisons, okay, which are interchangeable, can be given out or made available to the public, whether there needs to be a prescription, whether it's over the counter, or whether it is a substance that is straight out banned and illegal, okay? The schedules are referred to under state and territory legislation for regulatory purposes. Although each state and territory has its own laws, the vast majority of medicines and poisons are classified according to the SUSMP to achieve uniform national regulation. All right, so moving here to a further classification of a Schedule 4. All right, this is from the Federal Register of Legislation. It says here, classification. Poisons are classified according to the schedules in which they are included. The following is a general description of the schedules. For legal definitions, however, it's necessary to check with each relevant state or territory authority. Okay, so when we look back to Western Australia, the Poisons Act of 1964, poison means any substance included in a schedule. Okay, and that is outlined in the Medicines and Poisons Act of 2014. All right, so Schedule 4 here, we see prescription-only medicine. Substances, the use or supply of which should be by or on the other of a person permitted by state or territory legislation to prescribe and should be available from a pharmacist or prescription. Now, we see a disparity in the language used by the Chief Health Officer in Western Australia and the definition used here through the Federal Register legislation in regards to the terminology. So we have poisons are classified according to the schedules. We see here the actual term poison only used in Schedule 6, but we see the Chief Health Officer in Western Australia referring to a, quote, Schedule 4 poison. Okay, I'm going to keep moving along and you'll see why this disparity matters. This is a little description here from the Therapeutic Goods Administration regarding scheduling basics. It says here, scheduling is a national classification system that controls how medicines and poisons are made available to the public. That's right, poisons are made available to the public, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a moment. And they're classified into schedules based on their availability and requirements to take them. All right, so now that we've gotten that out of the way and we've had a bit of a talk about the scheduling and what classifies as a poison and so forth, I'm going to show you some authorizations issued by the Western Australian Chief Health Officer in relation to what he refers to as a Schedule 4 poison, more specifically the COVID-19 vaccine, although that was not made obvious to the people of Western Australia last year in 2020. All right, so we're going to look at the first authorization here from the 9th of April from the Chief Health Officer in Western Australia, Dr. Andrew Robinson, and I'm going to read this to you. Authorization to supply or prescribe a poison. All right. So what we have here, authorization for the purpose of emergency management during this public health and state of emergency and pursuant to Section 197 of the Act, and what he's referring to here is the Public Health Act of 2016, which gives the Chief Health Officer may authorize persons to administer, manufacture, supply, or prescribe poisons. So to allow people to inject others with poisons. Okay, it could be the COVID-19 Schedule 4, or it could be something else, the vaccine. All right, so just reading down here, a prescriber to prescribe a Schedule 4 poison. Okay, so he specifically uses the term Schedule 4 poison as opposed to the Therapeutic Goods Administration using Schedule 4 prescription-only medicine. Okay, so there's the first disparity that I'm noticing with the language here. What do you think that means? Put that in the comments below. All right, anyway, moving back to the letter here, or a Schedule 8 poison. Okay, so Schedule 8 being even more serious, a controlled drug, through the provision of a digital image or copy of a prescription to a pharmacist, okay, subject to the directions in paragraph 1. All right, so basically this authorization here, setting the framework for the prescription of Schedule 4 poisons, okay? Now, he doesn't specifically mention a vaccine in here, rather a Schedule 4 poison. Now, he goes on to say Schedule 4 poison means a substance classified in the Medicines and Poisons Regulations 2016. We just went through that before. Okay, and he signed off on it. So this was all the way back in April 2020, before we were really even talking about a vaccine or anything like that. The Chief Health Officer here decided to put an authorization through for the handing out of the prescription process for Schedule 4 poisons, what he refers to it as. All right, so we move forward here, all right? We move forward a little bit more to May, okay? So we go to the next month, May 2020, and another authorization from the Chief Health Officer in Western Australia, this time removing the need for prescriptions, okay? So we have here, we have 9th of April, then we go to 29th of May. So 9th of April, prescription is necessary. 20th of May, prescription is no longer necessary for a Schedule 4 poison. Okay, it says here, for the purpose of emergency management during this public health state of emergency. This is again just the legislation that basically says that the Chief Health Officer can override the existing legislation. Here's the directions. Directions in this paragraph are that the pharmacist must be satisfied before supplying Schedule 4 poison, that the person of whom the Schedule 4 poison is to be supplied is undergoing treatment essential to a person's well-being. All right, well, the government just has a blanket stance that COVID-19 vaccines are essential to everyone's well-being. That's the stance of the government. So it's very vague and generalized. And this was the reasoning used in this particular authorization in order to remove prescriptions from what the Chief Health Officer in Western Australia refers to as Schedule 4 poisons. All right, so it's almost like they were setting it up for something like, I don't know, a vaccine rollout where everyone needs to get vaccinated and there's not enough time for people to get prescriptions. People just need to go and get jabbed. All right, here's another authorization from the Chief Health Officer in Western Australia. This time from this year, the 18th of February. Again, Dr. Andrew Robinson. This time, the authorization is in relation to expanding personnel who are authorized to administer the Schedule 4 COVID vaccine. Okay, so I'll send all this out to you. So what we saw last year was these authorizations from the CHO in Western Australia, setting the framework, getting his ducks in a line for the COVID vaccine rollout, but not referring to it as a vaccine, referring it as a Schedule 4 poison. And then it just sort of carried on to, first you need a prescription, then you don't. And now we see, of course, the effective authorization for various authorized officers to be administering this vaccine. Now, just to let you know that my belief is that from the very beginning, when this person referred to a Schedule 4 poison, he was referring to the COVID-19 vaccines. How did he know? How did the Chief Health Officer know all the way last year that the Pfizer and Astrazeneca vaccines would fall under the category of a Schedule 4 poison? All right, so both the Pfizer and AstraZeneca have been listed on the Australian Therapeutic Goods Register. Sorry, the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods. So they've got their own ID number, they've got provisional approvals, and they've been scheduled. Okay, as we mentioned before, all the drugs that are listed for use with the Therapeutic Goods Administration, also not listed for use, but are registered with the Therapeutic Goods Administration, they receive a scheduling, okay? And the scheduling refers to availability, obviously. Panadol, something you can buy over the counter and so forth. Schedule 4 requires a prescription unless it's a particular Schedule 4 poison that has been authorized by a Chief Health Officer. All right, so what you're looking at here is the registration of the vaccine. Okay, so this one here, the AstraZeneca vaccine, and I'll send it to you. You can see the poison schedule S4 standing for Schedule 4 with the Therapeutic Goods Administration. So it seems that all the way last year, the Chief Health Officer in Western Australia somehow knew that the COVID-19 vaccines would be a Schedule 4, so he was overriding legislation in preparation for that. That's my speculation. Okay, we see here the Pfizer vaccine, also a Schedule 4 poison. Okay, and now the question is, why are these injections referred to as poisons? Okay, we see language used by the Therapeutic Goods Administration here, referring to Schedule 4 prescription-only medicine. Notice they say prescription-only medicine, not prescription-only poison, whereas, of course, we look to the words of the Chief Health Officer referring to a Schedule 4 poison outlined here in the Public Health Act 2016, Western Australia. and that seems to be inconsistent with the definitions on the Therapeutic Goods Administration website. Okay, so it's all very confusing. Why are they using this term poison? One explanation for it could be is that any medicine taken in certain quantities could be a poison to anyone. If you take enough Panadol, it's a poison. If you misuse prescription medication, it could poison you. You know, even alcohol, you can get poisoning from that. So it could just be a legal definition to cover the Therapeutic Goods Administration and people administering drugs to use the classification of poison. But nonetheless, I find it very interesting that instead of using the term Schedule 4 medicine, they've decided to use the term Schedule 4 poison. Okay, so that's what I have to say on this section. Maybe you've got your own thoughts. I hope that that was able to be understood. I know that it seems a little bit difficult and it's very confusing, especially when we see words like poison. Of course, it makes us alarmed and we think, what the hell, the government's giving us poison? Well, you know, I'd argue they probably are in many cases. So you've probably got your own thoughts about this little section. So if you do, put that in the comments. And that wraps it up for the poison section of the MCJ report. All right, moving forward. All right, some good news, ladies and gentlemen. And that is that tomorrow morning, I will be interviewing the two founders of the Canadian Frontline Nurses. That's right, a great group of Canadian nurses who not only have they dedicated their lives to nursing, they are going above and beyond now during the corona situation. They've been outspoken against the restrictions, against the COVID policies. They've been activists speaking out. They've put their careers on the line. They've been outcasted from their peer groups in order to take a stand for what's right and to fulfill their duty to the public in relation to providing the best care they can. So I'm really, really proud and happy that I will be interviewing Sarah and Kirsten tomorrow morning, actually, and I'll air it on Friday night. So that's just some good news that I wanted to tell you guys about, and that's about it. Anyway, that's probably just about it for the show. Let me just make sure that we're connected right here. I can see you guys. I can see you there. No, it's not going to be live, so I'm going to record it, and I'm going to air it on Friday night. Okay, so I'll air it on Friday night, and it should be great. Now, I can see some of you tuned in right now from Facebook. How many people are tuned in on Facebook right now? Because you know what? It doesn't give me the actual updates. YouTube as well. Rumble, I think that we're connected, but I don't know if it's actually working. Thanks, Bradley. Today was a bit of a challenging show because we're speaking about some complex topics. Iron ore to China, Chinese expansion, militarization of regions outside of China via Chinese military forces, the use of the term poison and medicine being somewhat interchangeable through the eyes of the Therapeutic Goods Administration. I know that it seems a little bit confusing, and we're living through a confusing time, but unfortunately, hey, maybe not unfortunately, we have to go and do the research for ourselves, okay? The government is not going to explain things for us. We need to do it ourselves. Great. Okay, perfect. And there's Zach. Zach's a great guy running from comfort. I suggest that you get onto his show because he's doing a great job. Anyway, how about we do some Q&A? And if you have any questions for me, put it in the chat and you can ask me anything you want. I can't guarantee I'll answer everything, but I will certainly see what I can do. How about that? So yeah, feel free to ask me some questions and yeah, what would you like to know? We have some information going out actually. Let me see if I can pull it up on the screen actually. I'm going to try and put this on the screen because through Reignite Democracy, we're actually setting up some meetings this weekend. That's right. So we're setting up some meetings whereby if you would like to distribute information to counter the misinformation campaign of the government, you can meet up with either Monica, myself, or a different volunteer group in order to pick up some information, and you can distribute it. You can do some letterbox drops. You can, let's see. Can you see it? Let's see. I think I may have brought it up on the screen. Let's see. Can you see the information right there? You should be able to see it, I think. All right. Okay, Andrea there is saying, can I block someone? I can't block anyone while I'm doing it, but you can block people. If someone's being annoying, being a troll, just click on their name and block them, and then you won't see it anymore. Okay, all right, so what you can see right there, pick up locations for this weekend. So if you'd like to volunteer and be part of the solution, we've got Geelong on Saturday, 11 a.m. till 12 p.m. at the Steam Packet Gardens waterfront. And I'll put this on my Telegram group. We've got Glen Iris, Saturday, 2 to 4 p.m., Ferndale Park. Croydon, Saturday 3:30 to 5 p.m, Fred Gill's Oval. Somerville, Saturday 12 to 1:30 p.m, Greg Hunt's office. I'll be at that one. And Ballarat, Sunday 2 p.m. to 4 p.m, location to be announced. And Monica and I will be at that one as well. So I'll put it on my Telegram, and you can go and check it out. And if you'd like to volunteer, then it's good to have as many people on the ground as possible. All right. Gail, hey Gail, how you going? You had to give up on Rumble. Hopefully it gets better, right? We hope that Rumble gets better. Anyway, does anyone have any questions for me? And if you do, ask now. I'm thinking of actually expanding the MCJ report to 4 days a week. I think it's time. I think that there's so much going on that we need 4 days, not 3. Let's see. Did I hear the story that Dan was bashed? I don't know if there's any proof to back that up. I haven't seen any proof. I've heard the rumors, but I've seen no proof. Ben says we need this in Western Australia. Absolutely. We're going to be doing work in Western Australia as well. Okay, someone said, why does the Australian Parliament need a medical advisor? Well, what I would prefer is that we, the people, are left to make our own decisions, okay? I don't believe that we need the government making medical decisions for us. We can make them ourselves. And there's my friend Anthony there, and I'm actually taking his words. That's what he said in a great speech. Anthony said that we don't need the government making those decisions for us. We can make them ourselves. And I agree with that 100%. I agree with that 100%. We should be responsible for our own health, our own hygiene. We don't need the government, okay? And plus, they shut down debate. Experts that have differing views, they don't allow them to speak. We want a balanced debate. If you have nothing to hide, you hide nothing. That's what we need. Not unilateral, authoritarian style policy that comes down from the top and is enforced by the police. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, well, we see a lot of fear-mongering in the media. Susie says Dan slipped down the stairs. Right. I mean, that's what he's claiming, right? He slipped down the stairs. Who knows? I wasn't in the room at the time. I don't know. Personally, I don't trust the man. I don't give the man credit for anything he says. So for all I know, it's a big, stinking lie. Why should I believe anything that Daniel Andrews says? And why should you? Just having a read here. Sally says, can I look into the Olympics? Australia's still sending our athletes, but fully vaccinated. And they still have to quarantine. We see this all over the place, right? Countries that are so forceful with vaccines, they have no confidence in these vaccines. Even the World Health Organization raised doubts on whether or not this so-called vaccination would be able to prevent the spread of SARS-CoV-2. In Israel, of course, they're vaccinating everyone, but we see situations where concerts in Israel, the attendees are still required to wear face masks, socially distant, and show a vaccine passport. How confident are they? I would say not very confident. Terry says we need to take back running our lives, not by outside government. That's why we need to do everything we can next election to get good, decent people voted into Parliament that actually care about our country, not career politicians. We've had enough of them. Nadia says, what will happen with Craig Kelly? This is a devastating blow. Craig Kelly being wiped off social media, one of the great influential voices of reason in our country. And the problem is that, Facebook, etc. is so important because that's where the fence sitters are. That's where the general public is. Everybody, don't get me wrong, I love Rumble, I love Telegram, but Rumble and Telegram and apps like it is a haven for the converted, okay? So it's really important, of course, that we build our Telegram and our Rumble in order to stay connected, but it is a haven for the converted. What we want is to reach out to people within the society who are maybe on the fence, starting to ask some of their own questions, and to help provide them with content to show them that there is an entirely different side of the story that the mainstream media is not telling them. That's why Facebook's important. And that's why I'd be pretty devastated if I got taken off Facebook. And I hope it doesn't happen, but maybe it will. But that's why you need to go to Rumble so we can stay in touch. But more importantly, mcjreport.com. And go there and put your email address in. Just having a read. Greg says New South Wales China rail deal. I can certainly report on it, and look into it further if you'd like, Greg. You know, we need to keep an eye on everything China is doing here. Andrea says he's a liar in relation to Daniel Andrews. Okay, just looking. Mark Raleigh says, any news on the PCR cycle threshold findings? Well, we put together Operation Cycle Threshold. We've got a team of people. They're on the job. Okay, it takes a while for departments to email people back. But what I can tell you is that the wheels are in motion, and I will be reporting the results here on the MCJ Report. Just having a read through. Your head is still spinning about the vaccine being called a Schedule 4 poison. Why do they use the term poison, and why do they not use the term medicine? Schedule 4 medicine is a term commonly used in the Therapeutic Goods Administration in relation to Schedule 4 drugs. But of course they use the term Schedule 4 poison. That's right. They want to do pet quarantines. Okay, interesting. What's next? You know, they're looking for coronavirus in wastewater. Now they want us to put our pets in quarantine. Got it. Okay, just reading down. How many politicians would actually stand with us? Craig Kelly. David Limbrick, I feel, has done a good job. Who else is there? You know, Michael O'Brien made a tweet the other week about what he implied was bias within Victoria Police in relation to how they treat anti-Andrews protesters in contrast to other protesters. But will Michael O'Brien come out with us next lockdown and stand with us shoulder to shoulder? I don't think so. Just reading down, looking for some more comments. Today was a pretty hectic show, wasn't it? Terry says, what happened to Reignite Democracy site's posts? I'm not sure. What do you mean by that? Nadia says, so many Australians have lost faith in the government. That's right. That's why we need to do everything we can to get good, decent people voted in next election. I'm going to be talking to you more about that, okay? I know my statement lacks context. When I say we need good, decent people in, totally lacking context. I promise the context is coming. It's on the way. Just reading here. Andrea says, you wish I was the Prime Minister. Thank you. That's a nice thing to say. Things would be a little bit different. That's right. A little bit different in Australia. I can tell you that much. Trish says, you don't think our votes count anymore. Well, Trish, it's our best shot. Okay? It's our best shot. Democracy is the last weapon we have. And we need to make sure that we exhaust all options. Is that fair enough? I'm not sure how many Chinese students are coming over, but I've seen talks by the government to open up the borders to international students. Okay, so we'll see. Anthony says, after the failure of the COVID Safe app, do you think the government will have the competence to roll out a Vax app? Maybe not. That's a really good point, Anthony. We know that the government's pouring huge amounts of money into app development and the Australian immunisation registry, so I guess we'll see what happens. Our money, right? This is what they're doing with our tax money. I don't remember voting for them to do that with our money, do you? And Adrian says we need 1 million plus. We do. I say we need 5 million. Tell you what, 1 million of us take to the streets. Victoria Police can't do anything, or police, wherever you are, anywhere in the world. You get 1 million people out in the streets, the police have to move to the side, and they'll just have to stand there and watch. George Christensen is a good guy and he's speaking out. True. Have I heard anything more about Freedom Airways regarding Dolores Cahill? No, I haven't. I don't know what's happening with it. Do you? Thanks, Adrian. Andrew Hastie has been really good on foreign policy, especially in relation to the Chinese Communist Party, but I haven't heard much from him in relation to the corona situation. Kim says you're sick with a cold. Well, according to webmd.com, 1 out of 5 colds are caused by coronaviruses. In saying that, wishing you a speedy recovery. Oh, geez. Is that, I don't know, is that even I don't know if I'm making a joke or a comment. I don't even know what it is. Just reading down. Dave said, what about Serene? She's in for a big fight. You know, she's in for a very, very big fight. Dana says, what happened to Ricardo Bossi? Has he been quiet? I haven't seen anything, but so much of my time is preparing for this show and working on things with Reignite Democracy. So what do you mean, what happened to Ricardo? Francis says, lockdown for South Australia expires on the 1st of May. What are the odds? What are the odds? I mean, I have a sinking feeling they'll find a reason to extend it, if you ask me. Thanks, Bradley. Take care. Ray says, how do we elect real Australians? Okay, you got to research who's running. Okay, I'll be making recommendations. You got to learn how to use your preferences. We've got preferences for a reason. We need to be using them. Thoughts on cricketers still playing in India? Just another contradiction on a long list of COVID contradictions. Dave says, what do I think of Joe Rogan's podcast comments and backlash? I don't know. I haven't watched the Joe Rogan podcast for a long time. Andrea says Greg Hunt should be stood down. Well, I say he's violated his duty of care. Josh Frydenberg. Yeah, Josh Frydenberg, more concerned about securing our iron ore exports to China than he is about the very clear ambitions China has to bolster and build its military like never before. It is utterly, utterly reckless, ladies and gentlemen. It's utterly reckless. There's no thought about national security or our safety. Just reading through here. Do we have a new Governor General? A new Governor General? No, the Governor General has not changed. Maybe there are some people out there that think the Governor General has changed, but the Governor General has not changed. Hong Kong had more than 1 million people in the streets. They did. I think they had 2 million people, but ultimately in the end, the Chinese Communist Party was able to bring down the iron fist and put a stop to it. Okay? But, you know, the Hong Kong people, they fought really hard and they made their own little militia groups. They put up such a great fight. Now they're all getting jailed. All the pro-democracy people in Hong Kong, they're all getting thrown behind bars. And if you think it won't happen in Australia, let me tell you something. History always repeats itself, and anything that happens overseas can happen here. Just reading. Ben says, hold the line like the diggers did. I agree with you. Joe says, would I join Australia One? I won't be joining Australia One, but I will be making some other plans, which I feel will be very significant, and I'll tell you about those plans really soon. Thanks, Nikki. Just reading down. I wish I could get to all the comments. Zach says Ricardo works in the background and is not really active on social media anymore. Okay. Joe says you wouldn't even know who they are. Well, make sure that you keep watching the MCJ Report because I'll be talking about all sorts of really awesome people. Thank you, Stephen. Peter says Paul Murray is a hack. I agree. Remember the piece he did on Monica when we protested Daniel Andrews? Now's not the time to protest. The guy's sick. He's in bed. Do we care if he's sick or in bed? The guy sold us out. He went behind our back and sold out our sovereignty to the Chinese Communist Party, locked us in our homes arbitrarily, ushered in a police state, and Paul Murray said that we shouldn't protest him because, he's crook. Paul Murray, this guy goes to Sky News, puts his makeup on, reads from a teleprompter. It's not unscripted. It's not raw and for the people like it is on the MCJ Report. That's the difference between the MCJ Report and the media. Here, I'm funded by the public, and if you'd like to support the show, mcjreport.com/support. So I'm funded by you, I'm answerable to you, whereas, the corporate media, they're answerable to their corporate sponsors, their producers. Remember the project. Remember Waleed, right? Waleed Ali. He was about to say something about the vaccines, and then his producer sent him a little message. And Waleed said, no, I can't talk about that. These people are all controlled. That's why we need alternative media. Which reminds me, of course, if you would like to support the show, you can go to mcjreport.com/support. I do this full time now, and my work is only made possible because of your support. I'm proud to say that I'm paid by the public. I'm answerable to you, and that's why I'm doing the MCJ Report. This show's been a long time in the making. I first decided I wanted to run my own alternative news show in 2015. That's right, 2015. But I knew that I needed to learn. I needed to become better. I needed to become better researched. I didn't want to be some guy that just jumped on the internet making videos not knowing what the hell I'm talking about. And so the MCJ Report is the result of 6 years of observing, and then I became active in activism and getting really involved. And here we are today, MCJ Report. So if you'd like to support, mcjreport.com/support. If you do contribute, I'll add you to the MCJ supporters private Telegram group where we throw ideas back and forth. Sometimes we have little get-togethers, we go to the pub, we have drinks, we have a great time. But of course, in saying that, if you're going through a difficult time financially, I would prefer that you held off for another day, and I wouldn't want you to put yourself in a difficult position. All right, now, where's the chat going? See, I'm controlling everything here. There's no producer at the MCJ Report. I'm the producer. I'm changing screens. I'm talking to you. I'm opening up the browser. It's a pretty crazy little workstation, but it's all set up. It's all functioning well. Just having a read down here. So many comments, so many great people. You guys are great. I appreciate each and every one of you. It's so great to have you here. Mark says, what do I think of Alan Jones? Alan Jones has a lot of good content, has a sound message. Rowan Dean, I don't watch him. So I haven't watched him for years, so I don't really know. I feel like anyone on Sky News still sort of has to toe the line a little bit. Can I please do a report on India? I did a big report on India in the last show. You should go and check it out. So go to my Facebook page, scroll down, and you'll see my report on India. Great. Lots of great people here. You guys are amazing. Go to my Telegram, @MorganCJonas, @MorganCJonas on Telegram, and I'll post up the little promo poster where the points are going to be. If you'd like to pick up some flyers to distribute, you can come and meet up with us. Okay. All right, guys. Lots of love. Be safe. Be well. I'll speak to you soon.